Alrighty, hello everyone. How are we doing today? We are going to get started with our webinar that is brought to you by the Shortline Safety Institute. This is the first part of our three-part series called the Assessor series. This portion is about communication. Today we are joined by Sam Cotton and J.R. Sampson. They will be our guides throughout today's presentation. Sam is our Senior Safety and Operations Manager with the SLSI, and J.R. Sampson is one of our lead safety assessors. Both have many years of experience in a variety of different hosts of railroads through short lines, hosting companies, as well as holding companies. So please take advantage of their experience and expertise here today. Some features about the webinar. As you logged on today, you have a little toolbar that it should be on the right-hand side of your screen. At the end of this presentation, we will open for a question and answer session. During that session, we will allow any written questions that we receive to be answered here live. So we hope you brought your thoughts and your questions for later, and we'll have our experts answer that as well. So without any further ado, I will get us kicked off here, and Mr. Cotton will lead us throughout today's presentation. Sam, take it away.
All right, well, thanks everybody for joining in. Hope everybody's having a good day so far. So some of the topics that we want to talk about communication today. One will be just a little bit of an overview about communications in general. We're also going to talk about job briefings, the importance of job briefings, how to properly structure a job briefing, the components that they should have, a safety vision for your railroad, which we have found to be quite important. It's a relatively simple thing to do, but there is a lot of value in doing it. Also, reviewing rules. When we talk about reviewing rules, primarily what we're going to be talking about today is going to be actually reviewing the rules with your employees, creating opportunities to have interaction with your employees to heighten their knowledge and awareness of the application of rules in the field. We're also going to talk a little bit about safety committees, how to structure a safety committee, what makes for an effective safety committee, and we're going to have the question and answer session at the end. So give you guys an opportunity to ask any specific questions about what we discussed today when we get towards the end of it. So we'll start off with a little bit of an overall review. So over the past 3 years, we've gathered general information about the aggregate trends from our assessment processes. So we're approaching close to 60 assessments that we have done so far with the Institute. As always, no names or railroads are ever recorded, so we never talk in specifics to a railroad, but we do see trends. We do see commonalities and things that we believe are opportunities for railroads to improve their communication. The confidentiality is key to the process, the assessment process that we do. So that's why we never get into specifics. We never talk about a specific railroad or an individual. But one of the biggest themes that we find opportunities for improvement on is within the communication practices and behaviors. And when we talk about communication, that's a very broad subject. It covers a lot of different aspects of your operations on a daily basis. But communications as a group of topics is something that is critical to having a strong safety culture in a railroad. And we'll get into a little bit of some of the areas that we've identified as being some stronger points that are best practices. So we'll review some helpful information, in-depth resources that you can use at your railroad to help fill these opportunities with ideas to enhance your railroad's communication practices. So, once again, just to kind of touch on the overall here of the communication piece, and all of these that we talk about today will apply to communication, but communication is very critical in a railroad, and that communication can be in the form of the job briefings, the rule reviews, the safety committees, the things that we're going to talk about today, but also keep in mind that it's also about reporting processes. It's the communication of how your employees report safety concerns, but also how you communicate that information back to the employees once they have reported. So communications touches just about every aspect of your operation. And the more your employees know, the better equipped they are to create a culture of safety on your railroad. So, one of the key element here is there open and effective communication across the railroad? That's a question that we ask a lot when we do assessments. We get into this in detail with employees and managers, senior leaders, and we talk about the open and effective communication across the railroad. And when we talk about that, we talk about it from multiple different perspectives, as well as multiple different opportunities that railroads have to improve that. So, the key to it is employees must feel comfortable communicating to their supervisors about safety issues and communicating with their peers when they see unsafe behaviors. If the railroad's not communicating the importance of safety and encouraging their employees to speak up about safety, then safety risks are more likely to develop and less likely to be addressed before an accident or an incident occurs. So this is some of the avenues that we're talking about today for opening up that communication, the safety briefings, the interaction with rule reviews, the safety committees. These are all good avenues to increase communication and increase the effectiveness of that communication. So with that said, we're going to get into the job safety briefings, and I'm going to let J.R. Sampson kind of pick up with the job safety briefings and go from here.
Thank you, Sam. And in talking about just communication in general, it's been somewhat surprising, I think, to find over the last 3 or 4 years that a lot of railroads, there is a difference in the perception of the management group and the employee group as to whether or not there's open communication on a railroad. Now, often we find that management teams think they're communicating well. The workers don't believe that they're communicating well. And that's something that any railroad needs to take a look at. One of the easiest, most effective ways of making sure that you're staying in constant touch is to have job safety briefings. Whenever you have a job safety briefing, not to be confused with just a task safety briefing, but a job safety briefing, nearly all railroads do some sort of a job safety briefing. At the beginning of a shift, they may call them shift changeovers. They started with basically dispatchers. Whenever a new dispatcher came on duty, they always got a briefing from the dispatcher going off duty. And it kind of outlines where things stand right now and what is yet to be done. Whenever we have a job safety briefing, you can have topics that come each day by using a fresh topic every day to discuss the job that is to be done that day. You'll find that your employees will actually become much more engaged. And whenever they have new and updated information, it's not just the same old thing every day. They'll pay a lot more attention. We've seen job safety briefings where part of the room was filled with people that were still talking with one another while the job briefing was going on. They weren't paying any attention, but yet whenever they handed around a sign-up sheet saying, we attended this job briefing, you see people signing this when you know that they weren't paying any attention at all. So making sure that there is a topic that is being discussed, even if it is just the job to be done that day, a topic that people have some interest in. You have to ensure that the employees understand what their job is for the day, obviously. And a key part to a job safety briefing is recognizing any particular associated risks. Often we hear people say, well, we really don't need to talk about that. That risk is there every day. Everybody knows about it. But still, it's a good idea to be able to review those things in your mind and to remind everybody else. I remember years ago, my youngest brother got a pilot's license. And I went with him one day to an airport, and as I saw him start the task that day, he got out a little book. He walked around the airplane, and he checked things, and he marked check marks in his book that he had checked that item. And whenever he got finished, I said, don't you do this often enough that you know all of those things by heart? Why do you have to use a checklist? And he said, I'm afraid I might forget something. And if you recognize the importance of the risks associated, you'll always want to make sure that everyone clearly understands what those risks are. You can also develop greater interest in job safety briefings by asking employees to take part in delivering those briefings. Have them engage the other workers in a discussion of what is to be done, how's it going to be done, where is it going to be done, who's doing specific tasks, and what are the safety issues that are to be included in that briefing. Make sure that they are very specific to the craft. We have seen railroads where they reviewed a rule every day during their job safety briefings. Sometimes the rules being discussed by, for example, an MOW crew had nothing to do with work that they did. It was designed for train crews or for mechanics. So make sure that there's something that will interest that particular group of people. And you can always use different formats. We'll give you an example in just a moment. This is an example called a START outline. And it's a very simple thing that you can remember by using START. So as you go through your job safety briefing, you can begin with the sequence of the activities to be engaged in. What are we going to do? Where are we going first? What are we going to do next? And how does the day's activities line up? How does it stack up against each other? People may have a better idea as to how things need to be lined up, so you should give them an opportunity. If you look at the very last one, two-way communication and feedback, that can take place at any point in a job safety briefing. Talk about the equipment that's going to be used. What do you need to do today's job? Is it always the same? And if so, do we kind of overlook that and think, everybody knows exactly what they've got to do today? Everybody knows exactly what we're going to be using, but it's always a good idea to remind each other of the things that you need. Always being aware of the safety hazards, the potential hazards, what could happen. There has always been a theme in safety discussions that I've conducted over the years. And I tell people, if you haven't planned for success, then you have a plan for failure. Because if you don't remind yourself always of the potential hazards, when one crops up, you won't be watching for it. And it can bite you very quickly. Always take the opportunity to discuss personal protective equipment that will be significant in keeping your workers' safety as they perform the various tasks of their day. And again, we'll talk about the two-way communication and feedback. Whenever you've finished a job safety briefing at the beginning of a shift, it's always a good idea to walk around the room or to go around the room and ask each individual if they understand what their particular specific jobs are for that day, if they understand what the hazards are, if they understand what the PPE is. If any of you ever fly and sit in the exit row before that plane takes off every trip, there will be someone come and talk to you, and it's a safety briefing. They point out the significant issues of sitting in that emergency exit row, and at the conclusion of that very short discussion, they will ask you to verbally communicate if you're willing to take part in that task. It's always a good idea. It makes people feel personally involved. And you can use something like this START job safety briefing to kind of outline and give a body to the job safety briefing. You can do that with a form, such as you see here. If your railroad wants to keep track of these things, you could always have them fill out this form every day whenever they begin their job safety briefings. It would record what is being done. It would record the things that are being discussed. It would record who was in attendance and what questions you might have gotten during the the course of that job safety briefing. But I would remind you once again to always remember job safety briefings do not take the place of task safety briefings. Most of you will have a safety rule or be aware of a best practice that goes something like this. Anytime there's a task going to be engaged in that requires the coordinated effort of 2 or more employees, there needs to be a safety briefing. Now, that safety briefing is very much the same as this, and you can use the same concept of a start outline in your mind to go through. If you're lifting a box, something as simple as that requires 2 people. Who's going to do what? What are you going to do first? Obviously, you're going to pick it up. You're going to move it to a different location. You're going to sit it down. So you can discuss before you begin, where are we going to sit it down? What do you need to do this? Is it a box that's light enough for us to carry it by hand, or do we need tools for it? What's the potential hazard? Is the floor slick? Are there tripping hazards in the way? What do you need to do this with? Do you need gloves if you're going to be carrying something? And then ask, do you understand or do you understand? You can do something as simple as that for a safety briefing. You wouldn't need to fill out a form for that, but always remember that you need to go through the same kind of a outline, at least in your mind. Mr. Sam, talk to us a bit about safety visions.
Looks like it, there we go. All right, so another form of communication that's important on a railroad where we sometimes see this lacking a little bit. Some railroads don't have one at all. Some have them, but it hasn't been well communicated. The employees don't really know, aren't really aware of it. And sometimes the safety vision is in all honesty, it's so large, it's so much information that they just don't remember it. It's not something that stays in the forefront of their minds. So keep in mind that a good safety vision embodies the safety goals for the company and outlines in writing what those goals are. When railroads develop effective safety vision, it provides evidence of a higher level of commitment about safety. So here's the advantage for the senior leaders in the railroad, the opportunity for them to demonstrate their level of commitment and put it out for the entire organization so that everyone knows that this is what our expectation is for safety. This is what we want it to be. So an effective safety vision demonstrates that leadership's commitment to safety, but it also involves input across all levels and crafts. It heightens employee awareness regarding safe work practices. It's one of those things that it's an opportunity to keep safety in front of your employees on a regular basis. And we've noticed that where we have stronger safety cultures, this is one of the key things that we see is they have a well-written, well-thought-out safety vision, and everybody knows what it is. Everybody in the organization that we talk to is well aware of what the safety vision is for the company, and they're aware of who created it, and they're aware of what the expectations are for them going forward. So make sure that it's well communicated. It's highly visible across all on-duty locations. So, a lot of times we see a railroad will put a safety vision, say, in the front of their rule book. It'll be on the front page, but you don't see it anywhere else on the railroad. It's not well communicated. It's not discussed. It's not well known. This is something that you can have posters made up. You can have banners made up. You can put them at crew rooms, different points on duty locations, other office environments where you have your people together. And it's a way to keep that safety message in the forefront of your employees' minds on a regular basis. It contains an action plan or mission on how to attain safety-related goals. So there again, it has to be clear, concise, and easily fits the railroad's culture. So the key here is keeping it short but effective. And so here's a sample of what a safety vision could look like. So list your beliefs An example, safety is our priority and main focus. No job, move, or service is so important that we cannot perform it properly or safely. That's a pretty straightforward statement. Safety vision to list the goals. An example would be to have no accidents, injuries, or other distractions in our workplace that undermine safety. It's very important whenever you start putting together a safety vision, or if you have one and you just want to revise it, it's very important to put a lot of thought into it. And it's really good to have your employees involved in that at some level. The more you can get your employees involved in its creation, the more buy-in you get from your employees on believing what it says. So, we will attain our vision by, and there's an example there of how you can do that. So the key things is, what is your belief? What's our safety vision going to do? What's the goals? And how are we going to attain it? A little bit later in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about safety committees. This is another really good opportunity for your employees to work through the safety committee to create the safety vision. There again, the more you can get them involved in it, the more buy-in they have, the more skin they have in the game, the more they are committed to your core beliefs as a company. And this is just a great opportunity to be able to get this out in front of your employees and keep that reminder, that constant reminder in front of them. If you have a safety vision and it's buried in a rule book somewhere and nobody knows what it is and nobody reads it, then it's kind of lost its effectiveness. So this is an opportunity for you to examine that and look at it and say, do we believe we have a good safety vision? If we do, maybe we just need to communicate it better. Or do we want to completely start from scratch and recreate this, get the employees involved, put a committee together to build this? We've even seen railroads that have had contests where they challenge their employees to create a safety vision, and then they work on it as a group, and the person who created the winning one gets some sort of recognition for it. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this, but it's, for as simple as having a safety vision is, if it is thoughtfully created and it's properly communicated and utilized, it can actually have a very big impact on your railroad safety culture. And Mr. Sampson, I'll let you talk a little bit about rule reviews.
All right. Another thing we've found that a lot of railroads have a shortcoming in communication on their properties because they don't go back and take a look at the rules that they have in place. We often see and comment on what we call drift. In other words, a company has a particular rule that's written down, it was adopted, it was taught, people are aware of it, but yet over a period of time, the practice kind of falls away and they begin doing the particular task in a way that would actually be a violation of the rule. An example of that would be a railroad that has a rule about getting on and off equipment while it's moving. That requires standing equipment for mounting and dismounting. But over a period of time, people begin to say, well, I can get off at 1 mile an hour, and that soon becomes 2 miles an hour. And pretty soon you see sometimes where individuals get on and off moving equipment, slow speed. Managers see them do this. No one really takes exception to it anymore. In those cases, it would be very profitable for a railroad to review their rules on a periodic basis and a systematic basis where you do it ever so often. Is this a rule that we still want to be in place? Is this a rule that we expect to still be conformed to? And do we need to step up our enforcement? By reviewing these things on a regular basis, and whatever the topics are that comes up on your property, if you've had a series of efficiency test failures that appear to be the same thing, maybe you want to review the rules and determine whether or not the rule needs to be changed. I can give you a couple of examples where railroads didn't review rules, and these are obviously going to be very extreme examples. But many years ago, we went to a railroad which the company I was working for had just taken over the operation of these railroads. As I went to those properties to review what they were doing, there was two companies that were basically sister railroads. Each of them had operating rules that were based, whether it was General Code of Operating Rules. But whenever we went to look at the books that they actually had in properties, one of the railroads had ordered a new set of rule books, but they ordered the wrong edition. And just for example, let's say edition number 5 had just come out, and they were operating under edition 4. And what they had done was put out a general order saying that they were now operating under General Code of Operating Rules, edition number 5. But they issued to everyone general orders and operating rules, edition number 4. And everybody was still operating with the same old rule book, and no one really recognized that there was a difference. The sister railroad had ordered the correct books, and so they were using a new edition. The two railroads swapped employees back and forth, and for the longest time, they never noticed that they were operating under different rules in some aspects of their operations. That would have been a good place for a rules review. Take a look at the rules that you've got in place. Another railroad had a pretty major accident one time. They asked me to come and do an investigation to determine what the root cause was. And I didn't take very long to figure out that they were operating under commonly accepted practices that were a violation of the rules that they had in place. And the reason for that was that their rule book was an old rule book, and they updated the way they practiced, but no one was following rules anymore. They just did it the best way they remembered how. So those are a couple of examples of where you really need to do a review. Various topics, various actions can be taken place, but always review past observation records, testing results, know what focus you need to put on particular rules discussions. And whenever you review rules with crews, always allow time for discussion and questions, whether it's train crews, maintenance way crews, mechanical crews. Everyone needs to be able to engage in these kinds of discussions. Do you think this is still a good rule? Always do a systematic review. Actually have a group of people designated to sit down and go through either operating rules, safety rules, procedures, and is this the proper way? Is this the proper rule? Is this what we want in place for this railroad? Whenever we do an assessment of the safety culture of a particular railroad, one of the key things we always look at, communication-wise, is are people cognizant of the rules that are in place, and do they pay attention to them? Always having the PPE available to provide further support and resources is always a very important piece of keeping people working with safety in the forefront of their minds. And what are the rules requiring the use of the PPE? We have seen the extremes of railroads that require employees to put on PPE anytime they walk outside, to railroads that give all their employees the option. You can wear safety glasses if you choose. We'll provide them, but you don't have to wear them. Same thing with hearing protection. We have seen that as well. So it's always a good idea to review the rules and know what it is that you've got in place so that you'll know what it is you expect of your employees. You can also build safety committees. Whenever you look at building a safety committee or revising or renewing a safety committee that you've got in place, there's some common questions that need to be asked. People will say, well, why would I want to build one? And if I choose to build one, how would I go about doing that? What should the structure of a safety committee look like? What kind of things should be discussed at these meetings? And obviously, what does it look like if I have a safety committee that's ineffective? Or what would it look like if I have a safety committee that is effective? Who should attend these things? Who should I invite to be a part of a safety committee or to attend safety committees? So that's some of the things that we would want to consider. Why would you want to build one? To engage the employees and those individuals who are involved in the work on a railroad to actually be a part of solving safety questions or safety concerns that arise on a railroad. Building one, you can make a good outline of a safety committee. You can determine ahead of time what it's going to look like so you know what the key components are. Building a safety committee is not unlike building anything else. Put a good foundation down and build a structure to function in the way that you want it to function, so that whenever you've finished building a safety committee, it looks just like you want it to be. A lot of times I hear people say, well, we used to have a safety committee, but it got to the point where it just became whining sessions. Everybody complained about stuff. Nobody did anything. There is a part of safety committee processes that requires individuals to be held accountable. If you want to be a part of the committee, be responsible for helping to carry out solutions to safety concerns that are brought up. It's always a good idea to involve anyone that you can in a safety committee. They all would like to be a part if you give them a place that they fit in. Always know what the purpose of the safety committee is. You want to regularly bring together the workers on a railroad and those who manage the railroad so that they can have a cooperative effort. And this is always to be aimed at the communication that takes place and its promotion of the occupational safety and health in the workplace. Whenever you engage the employees and the managers together, make them dually responsible for knowing that you have a good, strong safety culture in the workplace, you can accomplish great things together. This is an opportunity to assist the employer and to make recommendations for improving. Whenever you look at your railroad, you may have a union on the property. It's always a good idea to ask them to be involved in both determining what the purpose of the safety committee is going to be and in helping to lay down the foundation and construct in a good, orderly fashion its purpose. If you can do these things, you can engage the employees, you will go a very long ways towards building a strong safety culture. First, of course, you need to determine, do we need one? I knew a railroad one time that had 7 employees in total, including the general manager. Every day they came to work at the same time. They all came on duty at the same place. They all sat down together. They all had a cup of coffee. They discussed about what each work group was going to be doing during the day. They discussed any safety concerns that came up on a daily basis. In that case, I would say you probably don't really need a safety committee. But if you've got people that go to work, different locations, different times of the day, you have people who are not always in view of and talking with each other, you need some kind of a committee to help structure a common goal of collecting safety concerns, dealing with safety concerns, and reviewing back with all of the employees what has been done. You can engage safety committees in many different activities. You can engage them in many different ways within that committee. You can determine what they're going to do. You want them to only look at safety concerns? Or do you want them to get involved in looking at safety rules, doing the safety rule reviews that we talked about a while ago? You want the safety committee to be a part of building and maintaining a good, strong safety vision for the railroad. And whenever you feel like the interest in that vision has slacked off, have the safety committee do a blitz of the railroad and once again, recommunicate to everybody what the vision for safety is on this property. You can have them engaged in accident investigation. Look at the root causes of accidents. Help to determine what the solutions are to ensure that you don't have continuous repeats of accidents and incidents on your property. So, Sam, you want to talk a little bit about the components of the safety committee?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the shared values with an open and non-punitive atmosphere. That's the leading statement that we have here, and there's a reason for that. You want the people on your safety committee to share the same values, and it needs to be an open and non-punitive atmosphere where they feel free to discuss safety concerns and they feel free to work with the railroad on how to resolve these issues. Having a good safety committee can also help to foster the mutual respect and clear communication. And that's what we're talking about here, is the communication. So having the committee put together so that they have that open and non-punitive atmosphere where they can help to build some of that respect and trust through better communications with the railroad is critical. I've seen safety committees that had kind of lost their effectiveness. They've gotten to a point where it's, in the words of some railroaders that we've talked to, it's like, well, once a month they get together and eat lunch, but I don't know that they really do anything. So, the component there is to make sure that it's clear and concise what the intent for this committee is. Making sure that they have a willingness to make change and improve safety. And that goes on both sides. The railroad, when you put a safety committee together, it's imperative that the railroad understands that the things that the committee identifies, the railroad needs to be ready to take action on. Now, obviously, we all know that we can't address everything immediately, but we can always build a plan on how we're going to address something, whether that be short-term or mid-range or even a long-term plan. Bylaws and other policies, such as accountability procedures to ensure the agreed-upon work is completed, and a process for communication, notification of accomplished work, and summary of discussion that took place during the meeting. So we're going to get into this here in a little bit more detail in the next slide, but when we talk about the safety committee components, the accountability is critical. You have to make sure that everybody knows what their responsibility is. What's the purpose? What's the structure? What's the function? What am I supposed to do here? And hold them accountable for getting it done. And then you need to make sure you have a process. We're going to talk a little bit more here about protocols, how you build a safety committee protocol. And that needs to outline what that process is for the communication notification of the accomplished work and a summary of discussions that took place. So keeping minutes. Another key piece of a safety committee is the minutes that you keep of the meeting. All of that needs to be transparent. That needs to be communicated to the rest of the workforce as well, not just within the committee. Oftentimes we see on railroads that they have a safety committee and they may be doing good work, but the majority of the railroad is totally unaware of what they do. They're failing to communicate that piece back out to the rest of the workforce, and it's critical that they know. So it's one of those things that the more you talk, the more you promote it, the more your employees are aware of it, the more effective it can be. So building the safety committee protocols, that's another one that a lot of railroads will have a safety committee, and it's not very well structured, and it's partially because they don't have a written protocol on what it's going to do, what its function is, what its purpose is, what the structure is going to be. So, some of the key bullet points here is communicate the creation. So once you've put your safety committee together, communicate that out to your workforce. Your safety committee protocol can establish the expectations. It can also establish the bylaws to govern the conduct within the committee. Another good point for a safety committee protocol is what's the process you're going to use to appoint people to the safety committee? Is that going to be done by vote? Is it going to be a mandatory rotation of, you can only serve on the committee for 12 months, or is it a permanent assignment? These are all things that you have to think about when you're creating it. But creating that document, that protocol, helps everybody to know what their responsibility is. And keep in mind that a lot of times on railroads, especially in the short line industry, so you may have one person who's spearheading your safety committee, and he does a really good job, but there's no safety committee protocol in place because he's been doing it so long, he knows exactly what to do and how to do it. He keeps it functioning correctly and everything's working well. What happens when he leaves the organization? Does the next person know how to continue that good work? If you have a protocol, they do. They have something they can pick up and follow. The protocol can create the agendas and prepare the minutes, the note-taking responsibilities. It can assign the accountability for everyone who's going to perform those functions. Mutual respect within a safety committee is always critical. If your safety committee turns into a complaint session, as JR had talked about a little bit earlier, that's a problem. You want to do everything you can to keep your safety committee positive. And keeping that mutual respect for all speakers and everyone having an equal voice is critical. But the key to that is making sure that the committee has a protocol where they understand what their function and their responsibilities are. And the easiest way to do that is to outline it that, the committee is here to come up with solutions, not just identify problems. Identifying problems is a part of the work, but the second part of that has to be identifying and creating the solutions to those problems. And having the employees on the committee being actively involved in that process definitely helps to build that mutual respect, and it also helps to make sure that the rest of your workforce sees and hears all of what's going on and all of the good work that the committee can do by communicating it out. So the key thing is making sure that you have a protocol in place that identifies the purpose, the structure, the function, builds in the accountability, has a process in there for capturing the minutes, and then communicating that out to the entire railroad. It's very critical that the entire railroad knows what the committee's doing, because those folks are going to be the ones that come back and feed information to the committee members to grow even greater detail on some of the concerns that are in the workforce that they can then work to address. So additional value, safety committees can be more than just a meeting group, but an active part of your railroad's outreach and community. So, as we talk, your safety committee can help create the safety vision for the railroad. Your safety committee can help do the rules review. Your safety committee can be involved in, you could have someone on there that's involved in Operation Lifesaver that can do outreach work with the community. Safety committee could also be the vessel to perform yard cleanups, yard inspections, siding inspections. They can also plan your recognition events, host family days, and volunteer opportunities. They can also help to structure when you get into some of your hazmat drills, those type of things. Safety committees are a great place to generate ideas on how to do that. They're also a good resource for you to tap into with your railroad to help plan those type of things, to work with your local emergency responders on putting that type of thing together. So they can bring a lot of value to your railroad. And we typically see, even where we have railroads that have particularly strong safety committees, a lot of times they're really an underutilized asset. There's a lot more that they for the railroad that they could be helping. It just takes time to sit back and kind of think outside the box a little bit, work with your committee on additional work that they could do for you. So, Michelle, you want to?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sam. Alrighty, well, that will come to the end of our content for our webinar today. We'd like to thank our panelists for joining us. It is always a pleasure to have you with us, sharing your knowledge with the industry through this webinar. And now it is the time for our attendees to ask their questions. So if you are with us live here today, we will entertain your questions. So in the GoToWebinar toolbox that opened on your screen in the lower right-hand side, there is a portion where you can type in some questions. It's your little questions box there, and if you type in any questions that you may have from this presentation or any questions that you would like to ask our assessors here, JR, and as well as Mr. Cotton, now is the time to do that. And I will read them here in order that they come in. So, all right, looks like we have one here to get us started. So this pertains back to safety committees. JR, I'm gonna ask you to take the bull by the horns on this one. The question is, how much notice do you have to give your property if it is unionized when forming a safety committee?
Well, the answer to that will be up to whatever your union contract calls for, obviously. However, whether you have a particular clause in a union agreement that specifies how much involvement they are supposed to have, it would always be a good idea to talk to them in advance, explain, have them come in and sit down and discuss the formation of a safety committee, talk about whether they can be involved and to what extent they would like to be involved. You never want to turn your safety committee over to a union, in my opinion, because you actually do run the railroad. You're always going to be responsible as managers on the property as to what actually happens on that railroad. But to have the union buy in, they have great ideas many times. And obviously you want the cooperation of everyone involved. So advance notice, I would say ask them to come in and just explain up front what is going to be done, what's being considered, and ask them to be cooperative and to engage and see what their opinions are. So a time, I couldn't really specify a time, but the involvement, I think, is very important.
Great. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Sam?
Well, I definitely agree with what JR was saying. Union involvement in your safety committee is very important because let's face it, at the end of the day, a good safety committee is employee-led and management oversight. So you really don't want your management too heavily involved. You want the employees to pretty much run it. You want the managers to oversee it, to guide it, to make sure it stays on track, make sure it stays focused, and things move the right direction. If you can get your union bought into that and you can get them to help promote it, you're a step ahead, no doubt. And we have actually seen examples where the union was very heavily involved in the safety committee and management had to do very little. And that started, as JR said earlier, it starts that way with a good foundation for your safety committee to begin with. And these guys had done it right from the very beginning, and the union pretty much ran the committee. The management just kind of oversaw it. It was very effective and very well communicated across the railroad. I think it serves as a very good example of a best practice on how to do it.
Great. Okay, we do have one common question that comes up here, which is great. If you would like to view any of our webinars, you can always check out our website, which is www.shortlinesafety.org. And under our new website, you can check that out. We have webinars on demand. You can register for upcoming webinars. Like I said, this series that we had here today is one part of 3, so we have 2 more remaining parts to this series. So we do hope that you'll join us for the following series that come up in the next 2 months. With that, I would like to thank our panelists one more time, and for those of you that are live with us, if you have any questions that you would like to ask our experts after this webinar, please feel free to do so. My name is Michelle Malsky. I'm the Manager of Safety Programs here at the Shortline Safety Institute, and if you have any webinar feedback or some suggestions about what we can do better or some new topics that you'd like to see, please shoot me an email, give me a call. You know, we're available. We're here to talk. We're a great resource for you guys. So, and anything that we can do to help you in your quest for enhancing your safety culture, we are here. And so with that, thank you everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you on the next part. Thank you all and have a safe day.